Welcome to section 1.5. In this video, we are going to learn how to take negative numbers to powers. So in the previous section, we looked at how to take a positive number to any power and what does it mean to raise a number to an exponent. Now in this section, we're going to be doing the same thing, except for we are going to be focusing on negative numbers rather than positive numbers. So to start off, let's read this investigation that we would like to do. So the question is, what happens when we take a negative number to an even exponent and an odd exponent? So, and also if you need a reminder down here, I have that even numbers are multiples of 2. So for example, 2 is an even number, 4 is an even number, 6 is an even number, 8 is an even number, 10 is an even number, 12, 14, 16, and so on. And these are even numbers because they all can be divided by the number 2. While odd numbers are numbers that are not divisible or can't be divided by 2. For example, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and so on. So these are odd. These numbers are odd because they can't be divided by 2. So for example, 1 divided by 2 does not get you a whole number, like 0, 5, or 4. So with that in mind, let's work through some of our first examples. Once we work through these examples, we can then go down here and answer this investigation question. So let's look at the first example. We have negative 1 squared. So one important thing that I do want to point out that a lot of people find really confusing is that there are these parentheses around this negative 1. And that is very, very important. Because let's say if instead I wrote negative 1 squared, this is essentially, because there's no parentheses around this entire negative 1, it's not clear on what exactly we're actually squaring. Are we squaring this 1 on its own, or are we squaring that negative with the 1? So just with this notation on its own, this would be 1, or with the negative would be on the outside, and then we'd actually be just doing 1 times 1, which would be 1 times 1 is 1, and then we have a negative, so we're going to bring out that negative. But this is not correct. So what we are doing here is we're actually squaring this entire negative 1. So with that in mind, let's do the problem. So we have negative 1 squared, so that's just going to be negative 1 times negative 1. So 1 times 1 is 1, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So this is going to equal positive 1. Looking at example 2, we have negative 1 cubed, or negative 1 to the third power. So let's do this. So we have negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. So in example 1, we found that negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So we're going to have positive 1 times negative 1. A positive times a negative is a negative. So we're going to get out negative 1. And negative 1 is our answer for example 2. Looking at example 3, I encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own before I go through it. And assuming you have given this problem a try, let's work through it together. So we have negative 2 to the fourth power. So we're going to multiply negative 2 4 times. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So negative 2 times negative 2 is going to get us a positive 4. And then we're going to have times negative 2, and then times another negative 2. So 4 times negative 2 is going to be negative 8. Because a positive times a negative is a negative. So we're going to have negative 8 and then times negative 2. So negative 8 times negative 2 is going to get us positive 16. So for example 3, our answer is positive 16. Now looking at example 4, we have negative 3 to the 5th power. So I encourage you to pause this problem and try it on your own. And assuming you have tried this on your own, let's work through it together. So we have negative 3 to the 5th power. So we're going to multiply negative 3 5 times. So we're going to have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So we should have 5 3s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So negative 3 times negative 3 is going to be positive 9. And then we're going to have this. We're going to have times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. And then from there, we're going to do 9 times negative 3, which is negative 27. And then we're going to have times negative 3 times negative 3. Negative 27 times negative 3 is going to be 81, positive 81. And then we're going to have times negative 3. And 81 times negative 3 is going to be a final answer. And that is negative 243. Now, before we work through examples 5 and 6, I just want to take note of the trends that we can notice from these 4 problems. So in example 1, we had an exponent of 2, and 2 is an even number, and we got out a positive number. Now looking at example 2, we had 3 as an exponent, which is an odd number, and we got out a negative number. Looking at example 3, we have an even number as our exponent, and we got out a positive number, like how we did in example 1. When we had an even exponent, we also got out a positive number. And looking at example 4, when we had an odd exponent, we got a negative number, just like we did in example 2 with an odd exponent of 3. So with that in mind, in example 5, based on these answers, we can assume that we might get out a positive number, and then in example 6, we might get out a negative number because we have an odd exponent. But with that in mind, let's work through these problems and see if that assumption is true. So for example 5, I encourage you to pause the video and try it on your own. And assuming you have given it a go, let's work through it together. So we have negative 10 squared, which is asking us what is negative 10 times negative 10. And negative 10 times negative 10 is going to be a positive 100. So this holds true because our exponent is even. We got out a positive number. And looking at example 6, we're going to have negative 10 cubed, which is negative 10 times negative 10 times negative 10. And negative 10 times negative 10 is 100. And then times negative 10. Negative 100 times negative 10 is negative 1,000. So our assumption holds true. And this right here actually is going to be, this right here gives us our answer to this investigation that I mentioned earlier. So the question was, what happens when we take a negative number to an even exponent and an odd exponent? And what we found here was that when we take numbers to even exponents, we get out a positive number every time. When we take numbers to odd exponents, we get out a negative number every time. So with that in mind, let's write out a rule here. So whenever we have a negative number, oh, that's really bad. Whenever we have a negative number raised to an even exponent, we will get out a positive number. However, on the other hand, when we have a negative number raised to an odd exponent, we will get out a negative number. So with that in mind, let's work through some problems, some more problems. So the question is what if we have a fraction, and so a fraction like this raised to a power. So there is a rule here. So whenever we have a fraction raised to a power, we're going to take this exponent out in the front and raise whatever number we have on the top of the fraction to that power, and we'll also raise the number on the bottom of the fraction to that power. So with that in mind, let's work through example 1. So in example 1, we have 1/2 raised to the second power, or 1/2 squared. So to solve this, we're going to bring this exponent to the top and bring it to the bottom. So in other words, this is going to be 1 squared divided by 2 squared. And 1 squared is 1 times 1, and 2 squared is 2 times 2. 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So our answer is 1/4. Looking at example 2, we have 2/3 cubed. So we are going to bring this exponent to both the numbers here. And we're going to get 2 cubed divided by 3 cubed. 2 cubed is going to be 2 times 2 times 2. And then 3 cubed is 3 times 3 times 3. So 2 times 2 times 2 is going to be 8. And 3 times 3 times 3 is going to be 27. And that is going to be our final answer. Looking at example 3, we have 3/4 to the 4th power. So I encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own. And assuming you have given this a try, let's work through it together. So we're going to raise the top number and the bottom number to the 4th power. So this is going to equal 3 to the 4th power divided by 4 to the 4th power. And 3 to the 4th power means we're going to multiply 3 4 times. And if we multiply 3 4 times, you should get 81. And the 4 to the 4th power means we should multiply 4 4 times. And if you do that, you're going to get the answer of 256. And that is our answer. Now, before I go through example 2, I encourage you to try this one on your own and give it a go. Just one thing to keep in mind is we now have a negative number. So assuming you have given this a try, let's work through it together. So we're going to raise the exponent to both the numbers. So we're going to get -6. And don't forget those parentheses like I mentioned. Squared divided by 3 squared. So in other words, this is saying what is -6 times -6? And -6 times -6 is positive 36. And 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. And 36 divided by 9 is actually 4. Looking at example 5, we have 10 over -5 cubed. So I encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own, and assuming you have given it a go, let's work through it together. So let's bring out this exponent to the numerator and the denominator. And the numerator is just a fancy word for the top of the fraction, and the denominator is a fancy word for the bottom of the fraction. So our numerator, or the top part of the fraction, is going to be 10 cubed. And the denominator is going to be -5 cubed. And remember, don't forget these parentheses around that -5, because if you don't have parentheses, that means a different thing, as I showed you above here. So make sure you put those parentheses around that -5. So, and in other words, 10 cubed is saying, what is 10 times 10 times 10? And if you do that, you should get 1,000. And then you're going to have that over -5 cubed. So it's going to be -5 times -5 times -5, which is -125. That is your final answer. Looking at example 6, we have negative. Well, we actually have, so this notation is a little bit different than the other ones, but this is a fraction. This is saying 7 divided by 9 cubed. And one thing to keep in mind is that this negative sign is on the outside, or is on the outside of this fraction. So we're not going to include this negative sign within the fraction. So this negative sign is just going to be floating kind of like outside the fraction. So we're going to, I'm going to mark that red so we don't lose that negative. And then we're going to do the work within the fraction. So we're going to bring this 3 out on the top and the bottom. So we're going to have 7 cubed divided by 9 cubed. So 7 cubed is 7 times 7 times 7, which is 343. And then we have 9 cubed, which is 9 times 9 times 9, which is 729. And then our last step is to not forget this negative that's out in front. And we're going to bring that out in front. And that is our final answer. -343 divided by 729. Now, before I work through examples 7, 8, and 9, I encourage you to pause the video and try it on your own. And assuming you have given this a try, let's work through it. So we have 2 as our exponent, so we're going to bring that out on the numerator and the denominator. So we're going to have a -10 raised to the second power, or -10 squared, and then we're going to have -5 squared. So -10 squared is -10 times -10, which will get you out a positive number because it's negative times negative, and 10 times 10 is 100. So you get positive 100. And then -5 squared is -5 times -5. So we're going to get out positive 25 as our answer. And this actually simplifies to a whole number. So 100 divided by 25 is 4. Now, taking a look at example 8, if you haven't tried this on your own, I encourage you to do so. Now let's work through it together. So we have this 2 out in front, so we're going to bring that in. So we're going to have -12 to the -5. So we're going to have -12 squared divided by -5 squared. And then the one thing we can't forget is this negative that's floating outside this fraction, like there was a negative in example 6. So we're going to bring that out in front, and I'm going to mark it red so we don't forget it. So let's do the inner work within this fraction before you bring out that negative for our final answer. So we have -12 squared, and -12 squared is -12 times -12, and that is going to equal 144. And then on the bottom, we have -5 squared, which is -5 times -5, which is 25. And then we're going to bring out this negative. And that is our final answer. Now, last but not least, let's work through example 9. So example 9 is a little tricky, but basically we have a negative floating outside the fraction, like in examples 6 and 8. But then we also have this negative floating outside here as well. So basically, we can write parentheses, another extra set of parentheses around here. So we're going to have parentheses within parentheses. But so basically what we're doing is we're going to take this 3 and cube negative 8. So we're going to have negative 8 cubed. And then we're going to cube 2 as well. So we're going to have 2 cubed. So let's write out these negatives. So we're going to have that negative on the outside. And then let's write the parentheses. And then we're going to have this negative here. So let's write that out. And then we're going to have negative 8 cubed divided by 2. So let's write that out. So we're going to have negative 8 cubed divided by 2 cubed. And please remember, do not forget these parentheses around the negative number. So I know that these parentheses can be a lot, but basically we have this parenthesis on the outside, and I put the second parentheses around here to finish this set of parentheses. And then these parentheses here to finish that set of parentheses. So let's work through this. So we have negative 8 cubed, and negative 8 cubed is going to be negative 8 times negative 8 times negative 8. And we know negative 8 times negative 8 is going to be positive 64. And then times another negative 8, that should get you negative 512. And then we're going to divide that by 2 cubed, which is 8. And now let's draw out all of the parentheses all of the negatives that we still have. Oops, my apologies. This is a negative 512 because we have negative 8 cubed, which is an odd number. So we're going to have our negative out in front from here. And then we also have to write in this other negative. So let's write parentheses and then write our negative here. So we have a negative times a negative, which we know is becomes positive. We can go chop chop to make that positive. So we are left with negative 512 divided by 8. And that is our final answer.